Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online guide video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we're going to be doing the Sorcerer class guide, and it's mainly on the skills and passives of the class. So we're going to be talking about the active skills, the passive skills, and the ultimate abilities of each of the skill lines within the Sorcerer class. So let's go ahead and get started taking a look at the first skill line, Dark Magic. Now we are going to start with the passives first, then active abilities, then ultimate. So going over the passives, starting with the first one, Unholy Knowledge. This reduces the magicka and stamina cost of your abilities by 5%. So any magicka or stamina ability you cast, regardless if it's a part of your class or weapon skill line, armor skill line, it doesn't matter, you get 5% reduced cost. Now, Blood Magic. When you hit an enemy with a dark magic ability, you heal for 10% of your max health. This effect can occur once every 0.5 seconds. So anytime you cast one of these abilities and it deals damage, you basically will heal yourself. So really nice. Next one is called Persistence. This one, after blocking an attack, your next magic stamina ability costs 15% less. This is really good for when you're tanking, and even when you're playing like solo in the world, you'll be blocking attacks, and this really helps your next magic and stamina ability cost reduction. Exploitation. Now this is really cool. When you cast a dark magic ability, you grant minor prophecy to you and your group, increasing spell critical by 1320 for 20 seconds. So that means anytime you cast any one of these active abilities or the ultimate, you will give your group and yourself minor prophecy, increasing spell critical rating. Alright, so now moving on to the active abilities. Starting with the first one, we have Crystal Shard. Now this does have a cast time of 1 second, but basically you can conjure a dark crystal to bombard an enemy, dealing X amount of magic damage. Now, it does have two morphs. Starting with the first morph, we have Crystal Blast. So this does the same thing. You call upon a crystal, it shoots out, hits an enemy, dealing damage and stunning them for 2 seconds. Also damages nearby targets for X amount of magical damage. So this one will stun a target, and then it'll deal damage to surrounding enemies. The next one is called Crystal Fragments. So this one, basically, casting any other magic ability has a 35% chance of causing your next crystal frags to be instant cast, deal 20% more damage, and cost 50% less magicka. So it basically makes it an instant cast instead of a 1 second cast time. It does 20% more damage. It's really kind of nice. A lot of people like to use this one. Alright, going on to the next ability we have is called Encase. Encase, call forth Daedric shards from the earth to immobilize enemies in front of you for 4 seconds. So basically it just grabs them all and holds them in place. It has a 6 meter wide by 18 meter long range. So this thing is really a big area of coverage. Now, it does have two morphs. The first one is called Shattering Prison. So basically it does the same thing. You call forth the shards, it immobilizes them for 4 seconds. After the mobilization ends, it explodes, dealing magic damage to all the enemies that were held. The next one is called Restraining Prison. This does the same thing, but you gain major vitality for 2 seconds, plus 1 second per enemy held, up to 6. So major vitality increases your healing received by 30%. Moving on to the next ability, we have Ruin Prison. So this one, imprison an enemy in a constricting sphere of dark magic. After a short duration, they are stunned for 3 seconds. This stun cannot be blocked. And then there's two morphs. The first morph being Rune Cage, imprison an enemy in a constricting sphere of dark magic. After a short duration, they are stunned for 3 seconds. It deals X amount of magic damage if the stun lasts the full duration. The stun cannot be blocked. Then you have Defensive Rune. Now this one, you place a rune of protection on yourself for 1 minute. While active, the next enemy to attack you is imprisoned in a constricting sphere, stunning them for 3 seconds. this stun cannot be blocked. So it's basically you cast it on yourself, and then anyone who hits you is going to get stunned for 3 seconds. The next one is called Dark Exchange. This one, bargain with darkness to restore X amount of health and magicka instantly. It does cost stamina and an additional amount of magicka over 20 seconds. There is 2 morphs to this. The first one is called Dark Deal. This one costs magicka and gives you health and stamina back, plus stamina over 20 seconds. And then the other one is called Dark Conversion, which has a reduced cost, but gives you the same amount of health, magicka, and magicka back over 20 seconds. The last ability is called Daedric Mines. Now this is a really cool ability I like. Surprise your foes by placing 3 volatile Daedric Mines around you, which take 3 seconds to arm and last for 30 seconds. When a mine is triggered, it explodes, dealing X amount of magic damage and immobilizing the enemy for 3 seconds. Now it does have 2 morphs. The first one being Daedric Tome. So surprise your foes by placing 3 Daedric Mines at a target location, which arm instantly and last for 30 seconds. When a mine is triggered, or it explodes, dealing X amount of magic damage, mobilizing enemies for 2 seconds. And then you have the last one, which is called Daedric Minefield. You can you'll place 5 mines around you, which take 3 seconds to arm and last for 30 seconds. They explode, dealing X amount of damage and mobilizing enemies for 2 seconds. It's really, really a nice one, that one is. Okay, so now that we've talked about dark magic, let's move on to Daedric Summoning, starting with the passives. The first one is called Rebate. So this one you restore X amount of magicka when one of your Daedric Summoning pets is killed or unsummoned. So if you unsummon an animal or one of your Daedric pets, or you get one killed, they will give you magicka. Now remember, all pets are immune to damage in dungeons and trials. I think it's just trials now, but I could be wrong. But yeah, they just basically don't take any damage, so they won't die. Power Stone is the next one. Reduce the cost of your ultimate abilities by 15%. This is an awesome one because all ultimates are 15% less. And then Daedric Protection. Increase your health and stamina recovery by 20% while you have a Daedric Summoning ability slotted. This is really good because you can get that higher stamina recovery and health recovery, and it's not considered a major thing. It's just you get 20% extra. So it's not like a buff or anything passively. It's just you get this. So it's really nice. Next is called Expert Summoner. And this one increases your max health by 8% while you have a Daedric Summoning pet active. This is one of the reasons why you see a lot of tanks and healers running those, is because it gives them extra health to survive with. Alright, starting with our first active ability, we have the Unstable Familiar. This one, command the powers of Oblivion to send a Daedric Familiar to fight by your side. The familiar attacks, dealing X amount of shock damage. Once summoned, you can activate the familiar special ability, dealing X amount of shock damage every 2 seconds for 8 seconds to an enemy near him, and the familiar remains until killed or unsummoned. Now, we have 2 morphs here. The first one is called the Summon Unstable Clanfear. This one command the powers of Oblivion to send a Daedric Clanfear to fight by your side. This Clanfear's headbutt deals X amount of damage, and then while its tail spike hits nearby enemies, it deals X amount of physical damage after a second. And then once summoned, you can activate the Clanfear special ability, healing you and the Clanfear for X amount of health, and it will stay until it is killed or unsummoned. The other one is called the Summon Volatile Familiar. So this is just like the original one. You summon a Daedric Familiar that does shock damage. And then once summoned, you can activate the familiar's special ability, dealing X amount of shock damage every 2 seconds for 8 seconds to enemies near him. The final pulse will stun all enemies hit for 3 seconds. So, and of course it has to die or be unsummoned to disappear. Next one we have is called Daedric Curse. Now this one, when you cast it, curses an enemy with a destructive ruin, dealing X amount of magic damage to the target and X amount of magic damage to all nearby enemies after 6 seconds. You can only have 1 Daedric Curse active at a time. This does have 2 morphs, the first one being Daedric Prey. When you cast this on an enemy, it does the magic damage and the extra damage to nearby enemies, but while the curse is active, your pet deals an additional 40% damage to this target, and you can only have this cast on one enemy at a time. But basically, your pet will attack this one until this wears off. Then you have the other morph, which is called Haunting Curse, and this does the same thing. It does the magic damage and the damage to the other nearby enemies after 3.5 seconds, not 6 seconds. This is 3.5 seconds. And the curse will continue to haunt the enemies and explode a second time, dealing X amount of magic damage to the target and X amount of damage to all other enemies after an additional 8.5 seconds. So basically, it'll apply the curse, explode, or deal damage, then explode, dealing damage to nearby enemies, and then it does it again. So, really nice. Next is Summon Winged Twilight. Now this one, you call an Azura to send a Winged Twilight to fight by your side or at your side. The Winged Twilight zaps enemies for X amount of shock damage, and its kick deals X amount of shock damage. Once summoned, you can activate the Winged Twilight special ability, causing it to heal the Winged Twilight and one other friendly target for X amount of health. The Winged Twilight remains until killed or unsummoned. Now, going over the two morphs of this, we have Summon Twilight Tormentor. This one does damage, does the same thing. It does shock damage and then shock damage from a kick. And then once summoned, you can activate the Twilight's Tormentor special ability, causing it to deal 50% more damage to enemies above 50% health for 15 seconds. So it's like a high-level execute, or a high-health execute. So it starts dealing damage the higher health they have, and then it gets to regular damage when they're below 50% health. The other one is called Summon Twilight Matriarch. Now this is really cool because this does the same thing as the original, but this one is once summoned, you can activate the Twilight's special ability to heal the Matriarch and up to 2 other friendly targets instead of just the Matriarch and 1 other friendly target. This can actually heal for more, and it actually heals more people. The next ability we have is called Conjurer Ward. This is the Sorcerer's Shield. So basically, this one conjure globes of Daedric energy for protection, granting a damage shield that absorbs damage shield for you and your pet that absorbs X amount of damage for 6 seconds. The damage shield strength is capped at 40% of your max health. And then you have 2 morphs with this. The first one being Hardened Ward. This basically gives you a bigger shield based on your max health. So instead of 40%, it's 50%. And so the shield absorbs more, and it has a higher capped value. So it's really nice. It's a bigger shield, more health added to it. And then the other one is called Empowered Ward, which this one does the same thing as the original. It gives you a shield that absorbs X amount of health for 10 seconds. So, but the strength of shield is capped at 40, and then also grants minor intellect to you and nearby allies, increasing your mag recovery by 10% for 10 seconds. So it's really nice. Moving on to the next ability we have is called Bound Armor. So this one, the initial version of it, protect yourself with a power of Oblivion, creating a suit of Daedric mail that increases your block mitigation by 36% for 3 seconds. So what that means is anytime that you block an attack while this is active, when you activate it, that means spending the 3,848 magicka, you will be able to block any incoming attack with 36% more mitigation. So that means even if it's a base weapon like a two-handed staff or a two-handed sword or nothing but an ice staff or a sword and shield, if it's anything other than those two, you'll be able to block 46% of the incoming damage up front, and then with sword and shield it's 56, and ice staff. It does have 2 morphs, one being a stamina morph, and this one, protect yourself. You get the same thing, the Daedric mail thing, and then while slotted, your max... Oh wait, we didn't go over that. So this one has that, and then while slotted, your max magic is increased by 5%, and that's at rank 4, guys. So then you have this morph, Bound Armaments, and basically, while slotted effect changes to offer you max stamina by 8% at its maximum rank of 4, 5% at 1, and then your light attack damage is increased by 11%. And then the other one has the same kind of thing, but it has a while slotted, your max magic is increased by 5% to a maximum of 8%, and you gain minor ward and minor resolve, increasing spell and physical resistance by 1320. Alright, now going on to the ultimate here, and I don't think I did the dark magic ultimate, I didn't. So I'm going to do that real quick. We're going to do this first. Negate magic. Create a globe of magic suppression for 12 seconds, removing and preventing all enemy area of effect abilities from occurring in the area. Enemies within the globe are stunned, while enemy players will be silenced rather than stunned. So this is a really cool ability, and it has 2 morphs. The first morph being Suppression Field. Basically, it does the same thing. It suppresses the enemy's spells and all that kind of stuff, stuns them and everything, and then also the globe also damages enemies every 0.5 seconds for 12 seconds. Then you have the Absorption Field, which does the same thing. It does the whole stunning and all that kind of stuff, but then the globe also heals you and your allies for X amount of health every 0.5 seconds. So instead of doing damage, it heals you, and so one does damage and one does a heal. Alright, Daedric Summoning Ultimate, the Summon Storm Atronach. This is one of my favorite ones. So basically, you summon an immobile storm Atronach at the target location. Its arrival deals X amount of shock damage and stuns enemy for 3 seconds. The Atronach zaps the closest enemy, dealing X amount of shock damage every second. An ally near the Atronach can activate the Charged Lightning Synergy, granting the ally and the Atronach Major Berserk, increasing their damage done by 25% for 8 seconds. So that's a really good buff. Right, so this has 2 morphs. The first one being Greater Storm Atronach. So this one calls in this thing that deals shock damage and stuns enemies for 3 seconds, and then it'll zap the closest enemy, dealing X amount of shock damage every second. An ally can activate the Charge Synergy, again giving Major Berserk and stuff. This one has higher health and the duration of the Atronach lasts longer, because this one lasts for 21 seconds, this lasts for 25. The next one is called the Summon Charged Atronach, and this one I like a little bit more because it deals shock damage and stuns enemies for 3 seconds, and then it'll deal damage, shock damage every second, and periodically shock another enemy or shock all damaged enemies around it in the 6-meter radius. So it'll do like damage to one target continuously, and then it'll hit all targets every once in a while, and it still has the Charged Lightning Synergy. Moving on to the last skill line, the Storm Calling skill line. This is a really cool skill line. It's one of my favorites in the Sword class. Starting with the first passive ability, we have Capacitor, and this increases your mag recovery by 10%. So no matter what, you're always going to get high mag recovery with the Sorcerer. The next thing we get is called Energized, and this one increases your physical and shock damage by 5%. So if you guys don't know what this means, is any physical damage you deal, that means physical damage, will get increased by 5%. Any shock damage you apply from anything will be boosted by 5%. So this could be a set of shock or physical damage. This could be a skill or an active ability that does shock and physical damage. They're going to get boosted by that 5%. Then we have Amplitude. Now Amplitude is a really interesting one. It increases the damage against enemies by 1% for every 10% current health they have. So if they have higher than 10% health, you're going to do, for every 10% health, you're going to do 1% more damage. So if they have, say, 100% health, you will do, I think it's 5 or 10% more damage to them. So it's really interesting. And then it goes down. So you get less damage the lower health they get. Next is called Expert Mage. This one increases your weapon and spell damage by 2% for each sorcery ability slotted. Now this isn't just the Storm line. This is any sorcerer ability you have slotted. You get increased weapon and spell damage by 2%. Alright, Now going over the active abilities, starting with the first one, Mage's Fury. Now Mage's Fury does basically call a lightning bolt down from the ceiling and it strikes a single target, dealing X amount of shock damage if the enemy falls to or below 20% health within 4 seconds of being struck. An explosion deals additional shock damage to them and additional shock damage to nearby enemies. There is 2 morphs, the first one being Mage's Wrath or Wrath. So this one, it does this pretty much the same thing. When the enemy falls below 20% health, the damage it deals normally is increased, or increases the damage dealt to other enemies nearby. So the other and nearby enemies take greater damage. So this one does 249, this one does 500. The next morph we have is called Endless Fury. This one you basically call down the lightning bolt that deals shock damage, and then if the enemy falls below 20% health, it deals X amount of shock damage to them, X amount of shock damage to nearby enemies. And then if an enemy is killed within 5 seconds of being hit with this ability, you restore X amount of magicka. Alright, moving on to the next ability we have is called Lightning Form. This one basically manifests yourself as pure lightning, zapping nearby enemies, dealing X amount of shock damage every second for 15 seconds. And then while in this form, you also gain Major Resolve and Major Ward, increasing physical and spell resist by 5,280. This is a good way to keep your resistances buffed up. Then you have 2 morphs. The first one being Hurricane, which is basically it turns from a magic ability into a stamina ability, and it deals physical damage instead of magic damage every second for 15 seconds. The wind grows in size and damage, so it increases to 150% more damage and up to 9 meters in size from 5 meters. So it gets really big, and it still gives you the Major Ward, Major Resolve. But it also gives you Minor Expedition as well, increasing your movement speed by 10%. The other one is called Boundless Storm, and this does kind of the same thing. It gives you the lightning form, and it does the shock damage every second, but it lasts 20 seconds. And then on top of that, you get the Major Ward, Major Resolve, and it also grants Major Expedition to you for a brief period, increasing your movement speed by 30% for 4 seconds. Alright, moving on to the next ability, Lightning Splash. We have this one, which creates a nexus of storm energy at the target location, dealing X amount of shock damage to enemies in the area every second for 8 seconds. An ally standing within the nexus can activate the conduit synergy, dealing X amount of shock damage to enemies around them. There is 2 morphs of this. The first one being Liquid Lightning, which, if you look, this one lasts for 8 seconds, has a 4-meter radius. This lasts for 12 seconds and has a 4-meter radius. This just gets an increased duration over the original. It still has the conduit synergy. It still does the same amount of damage. The other one is called Lightning Flood, and this one has an increased radius, and its damage it deals is greater. So it does greater damage in a bigger radius, in 6-meter radius instead of 4, and it only lasts for 8 seconds instead of... Get it? So this one has a greater duration of 12 seconds. This has a less duration, but has greater damage and greater radius. So this covers a bigger radius, does a little bit more damage over every second. So this does 312. This one does 261. So this one maxed out, like with high max magic, a high spell damage, can actually deal more damage per tick over the 8 seconds, but it winds up being very equal to this. It's just this has a smaller radius compared to this. Alright, next ability is called Surge. Now Surge, when you activate it, you involve Meridia's name to gain Major Brutality, increasing your weapon damage by 20% for 33 seconds. While active, dealing a critical strike heals you for X amount of health. This can happen every 1 second. There is 2 morphs to this, the first one being Power Surge. This grants you Major Brutality and Major Sorcery instead, which increases weapon and spell damage by 20% for 33 seconds, and you still heal for critically striking your enemies. So, and it has a reduced cost as the ability ranks up. This one is called Crit Surge, or Critical Surge, and this gives you the Major Brutality for 20% weapon damage for 33 seconds, and then while active, your heals actually heal for more than normal every time you crit, every second, basically. So it's the same thing as this, it's just it gets a greater heal from it, and this one gives you major brutality and reduced cost as it ranks up. Alright, last ability we have here is called Bolt Escape, and this one is really cool. You transform yourself into pure energy and flash forward, stunning enemies near the origin location for 2 seconds. Casting again within 4 seconds costs 50% more magicka, so it can cost you a lot of magic if you're spamming this. Now it does have 2 morphs, the first one being Strike. This one will deal damage to enemies in your wake and stunning them for 3 seconds, and then casting it again will cost you 50% magicka. This scales off your highest offensive stat, so it's either max stamina or max magicka. The next one is called Ball Lightning. Now this is a really cool one. It's one that I really like to use because you transform yourself into a ball of lightning, shooting forward, stunning enemies in the near origin location for 2 seconds, and also absorb any projectile directed at you for 2 seconds. It does cost 50% more when you cast it again. So, alright, now that we've seen the active abilities, now we're going to do the ultimate ability here, and that is Overload. Overload is really cool. Charge your fists with the power of the storm, replacing your light and heavy attacks with new, stronger abilities. Your light attacks become lightning bolts, dealing X amount of shock damage to any enemy with up to 28 meters away. Heavy attacks blast enemies in a 4 meter wide, 15 meter radius in front of you for X amount of shock damage. Attacks deplete ultimate until you run out, or the ability is toggled off. So now this has 2 morphs. The first one being Power Overload. And basically this one increases the range of light attacks and the radius of heavy attacks, and increases their damage. So this one, you go to 32 meters in range on the light attacks. They also do more damage on the lightning bolt. And then the heavy attacks cover a 6 by 15 meter area and deal greater damage. And then moving on to the next one, we have Energy Overload. This is pretty much the same thing as the original. You get the lightning bolts at 28 meters, you get this stuff, but each attack restores magicka. So every time you do a light attack or a heavy attack, you restore magicka, and it's really nice. Plus on top of that, so when you do this, you can also do this when you run out of magicka. You activate this and just start throwing lightning bolts, so you start getting magicka back. And some people do use it for that purpose. It's kind of crazy and cool at the same time. But that is it for the Sorcerer class guide, guys. I know a lot of people were probably expecting more from these guides, but when you do a guide on a class, it's just to cover the passive and active abilities plus the ultimates. Because that's all there is really to a class. Because the weapons skill lines, armor skill lines, world, guild, alliance, war, racials, and crafting are all the separate skill lines from the class itself. Classes are the only ones that get 3 respected skill lines attached to it. So, and that is pretty much it for the video, which means you guys know what's coming next. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.